In a quiet village, an older couple lived a simple, contented life. Without children of their own, they focused all their attention on a devoted dog named Max. Their days were defined by a purely affectionate bond, a cycle of care that didn't rely on any specific outcome or reward. That quiet routine changed on a random afternoon. While in the garden, Max began digging with unusual intensity, eventually leading the old man to unearth a weathered chest filled with thousands of gold coins. The couple didn't respond with plans for a mansion or a new life. They were simply stunned, attributing the find to Max's intelligence and expressing a deep, humble gratitude for their luck. But an unearned stroke of fortune can be a dangerous thing to witness. To a neighbor watching from the fence, someone who sees every interaction as a transaction, this event suggested that wealth isn't the result of luck, but the output of a specific, stealable system. The young man next door watched the discovery and immediately began running the numbers. In his view, shown here in this flowchart, the dog isn't a companion, it's an asset. He assumes that if you provide the same inputs, the dog and a patch of dirt, you will get the same guaranteed output of gold. Driven by this logic, the neighbor waited for nightfall. Using a few simple treats as leverage, he breached the property line, kidnapped Max, and dragged him away into the shadows. Once the dog was trapped in his own garden, the neighbor dropped the facade. He gave Max a clear choice: dig up a treasure even larger than the first one, or face a life away from his owners. This plan relies on a precarious assumption. The neighbor believes that a creature defined by its loyalty can be forced into service through blunt coercion, ignoring the possibility that the dog might have plans of its own. The next morning, as the couple frantically searched for their pet, the neighbor offered a follow performance. He stood in his yard and lied, claiming he saw the dog running toward the city after a cat. Back at the neighbor's house, Max appeared to cooperate. He sniffed the ground, circled a specific spot, and began barking with an insistence that suggested something valuable lay just beneath the surface. The neighbor dug exactly where he was told and hit a massive wooden chest. Confident that his plan had worked, he immediately unclipped the chain, allowing Max to return to his original home. By providing the man with exactly what he wanted, the dog turned the lock on his own cage. He left his captor too satisfied with the victory to realize he had just lost his only leverage. That evening, the neighbor visited the couple to check on his alibi. In an attempt to seem helpful, he offered to take Max for a walk, a final move to prove he was in control of the situation. But as the neighbor approached, Max stood perfectly still and spoke in a clear, human voice, identifying the neighbor as a bad man. The dog effectively split the signal, directing sharp human sentences at the neighbor while maintaining a harmless bark for the couple. Facing another verbal attack the next morning, the neighbor's logic spiraled. Unable to explain it, he concluded they were practitioners of dark magic. Max never needed to use physical force. He simply fed the man an impossible reality, letting the neighbor's own guilt and confusion dismantle his composure from the inside out. The escalation reached its peak when the neighbor brought the village elder and a group of townspeople to the couple's home, publicly accusing them of witchcraft and demanding their dog perform its magic. The neighbor pleaded with the dog to speak, to prove the impossible things he'd heard, but Max remained perfectly silent, offering nothing but the typical quiet behavior of a household pet. The witnesses saw two very different things. They saw a peaceful elderly couple and their normal dog, and they saw a man who seemed to be losing his grip on reality, shouting at an animal to talk to him. The pressure of the crowd and the fear of looking like a fool pushed the neighbor into a corner. To prove he wasn't crazy, he felt he had to explain exactly why he was so sure the dog was special. In a final attempt to validate his claims, the neighbor confessed to everything. He admitted to the kidnapping, the threats, and the forced digging, believing the treasure he'd found would prove his story was true. He threw open the massive chest he had dragged from his yard to show the village the gold. But instead of shiny coins, the wooden box was filled to the brim with dry, gray sand. The confession of theft and the obvious lack of evidence sealed his fate. The elder ordered the neighbor's immediate banishment, clearing the village of his presence and returning the garden to its original peace. After the crowd left, Max spoke one last time, this time to the couple who had always cared for him. He proved the magic was there all along, but he chose to reveal it only to those who didn't want to exploit it. The neighbor's own greed provided the momentum for his fall. By trying to steal a fortune he didn't earn, he built the very trap that ensured his own absolute ruin.